Past civilizations throughout the world built massive mathematically perfect structures based on cymatic vibrational frequencies of the Earth itself. Nobody has been able to explain how these ancient people gained such knowledge of geometry and physics, or why they built in this overly complex manner. To unlock these secrets from lost civilizations, we need to travel to one of the oldest star forts on Earth, down in the country of Peru in South America. This will be part 1 in a 2-part series on Peru. In part 2, we'll be looking deeper into the exact advanced technologies used here. I'll link that below when it's released. The main site we're looking at is known as Sacsayhuaman, located in the Inca capital city of Cusco, Peru, that was taken over by Spanish conquistadors in 1533. The site is a huge megalithic terraforming construction built on the highest point of the city. The blocks are not only gigantic in size and weight, but they're also cut to fit perfectly together without any mortar whatsoever. The angles and geometry used are also extremely precise and resemble sacred geometric patterns and cymatic vibrational patterns, like we see with many star fort structures across Europe and the New World colonies. But this one was built by natives before Spanish arrived, making it one of the oldest star forts on Earth. If you're wondering what's so significant about these star fortification buildings, you definitely want to head over to my video explaining this. But basically, because of the advanced geometry and astounding resemblance to cymatic structures, researchers have theorized that these forts were built by advanced civilizations, possibly going back to an ancient age. And these structures incorporate advanced technologies, like river and land terraforming, advanced irrigation, alignments with celestial bodies, and even water purification and Tesla technology. I know this sounds like a lot, but if you look at the precision with which many of these were built, you can tell the architects had knowledge of frequency and energy that they should not have. And they themselves claimed in their writings that many of their structures, like churches and cathedrals, which were placed at prominent points in the geometric star shape, would increase the spiritual experience during church service, due to the mathematical properties and use of symbols and specific materials, such as steeples and stained glass. And all of these cathedrals were said to be based off the temple of ancient Israel, the Temple of Solomon. We have a video on that too. I'll link that below as well. So these star forts definitely had huge significance and incorporated ancient technology that is largely lost to us even today. But what is one doing all the way over in Peru, being used by the Inca as a ceremonial place of worship? Did they even realize what they were standing on? The Spanish, who arrived in the 16th century, did, and they did everything to wipe this lost history from our memory. Modern historians tell us that Sacsayhuaman was built in the 15th century, under the Incan ruler Pachacuti. Not much is known of this ruler's daily life and personality, because the Inca had no written language. What we do know about them comes from their oral histories and early Spanish chroniclers. They tell us Pachacuti was one of the greatest emperors of the Inca. Before his reign, the Inca people existed only as a small city-state of Cusco, which had been there long before his arrival. But he turned this small community into a great empire. 16th century Spanish chronicler Pedro de Cieza de Leon wrote, "Cusco was henceforth an imperial city, to which the chiefs and retainers of 100 tribes, all distinguished by peculiar headdresses, flocked to do homage to their common sovereign. Then it was that great palaces were erected. Then the famous fortress, with its cyclopean stones, rose on the Sacsayhuaman hill." End quote. Modern historians tell us he built massive megalithic sites like Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, Pisac, and Sacsayhuaman, all in his 33-year reign from 1438 to 1471. But I think it's much more likely he was simply improving upon much more ancient structures. You can literally see in the structure themselves where the Inca added their less advanced and normal sized renovations compared to the very large ancient giant stone blocks. Here's a passage from Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa in History of the Incas. Using the means of reciprocity, Pachacuti rebuilt much of Cusco, designing it to serve the needs of an imperial city as a representation of the empire. Each suyu had a sector of the city, centering on the road leading to that province. Nobles and immigrants lived in the sector corresponding to their origin. Many of the most renowned monuments around Cusco, such as the Great Sun Temple, Cricancha, were built during Pachacuti's reign. End quote. So someone had come before him and built these massive monuments. Someone with the ability and knowledge to move 100-ton stones and shape them perfectly together, all while constructing them in some of the most remote and hardest to reach terrains in perfect geometric alignment. And Spanish chronicler Cieza de Leon wrote in his travelogues, "The most detailed account of ancient Cusco is to be found in the pages of the Inca historian. He says that the first houses were built on the steep slopes of the Sacsayhuaman Hill. The city was divided into two parts, Hanan, Cusco, upper or north, and Hirin, Cusco, lower or south. The chief ward or division was on the slopes of Sacsayhuaman and was called Colcampata. Here Manco Capac, in 13th century AD, built his palace, the ruins of which are still in good preservation. So this hill was literally the first place people settled, according to this account, possibly on these giant ruins from before the age of modern human. The Inca themselves in their oral histories literally tell us they didn't build many of these sites, and that people created by Viracocha, their god, came before them. And this predecessor race was giant in stature. But they were a brutish and warlike people, so Viracocha sent a massive flood to wipe them out and turn them to stone. Records were taken of these oral histories by the Spanish chroniclers. They survive to this day, and historians love to discount their stories and claims, but they were simply giving us raw accounts of what the Inca told them. Almost all of the writings speak of this predecessor civilization of giants and the flood that took them out. And one of their main cities was located in Cusco. Here's a writing of the Inca creation story from Cristobal de Molina, an account of the fables and rites of the Incas from 16th century, which concerns Contiti Viracocha, who they believe was the creator, and how he made the heavens and the earth and the Indian people of the provinces of Peru. In ancient times, they say the land in the provinces of Peru were dark, and neither light nor daylight existed. In this time there lived a certain people who had a lord who ruled over them, and to whom they were subjected. The name of these people and that of their ruler have been forgotten. During this time of total night, they say that a lord emerged from a lake in the land of Peru, and that his name was Contiti Viracocha. They say that he brought with him a certain number of people, but they do not remember the number. When he had emerged from the lake, he went from there to a place near the lake, where today there is a town called Tiwanaku. When he and his people arrived there, they say that he suddenly made the sun and the day, and ordered the sun to follow the course that it follows. Then they say he made the stars and the moon. They say that this Contiti Viracocha had emerged another time, and on that first occasion he created the sky and the earth, but left everything in darkness. Then he made those people who lived in the time of darkness previously mentioned. These people did some disservice to this Viracocha, and since he was angry, he returned, emerging this last time, as he had done before. In his anger, he turned to stone those he created first. In that very moment, he made the sun and the day, and the moon and the stars, as we have said. When this was done, there at Tiwanaku, he made some people from stone as a kind of model of those that he would produce later. He made a certain number of them from stone in this way, together with a chieftain to govern and rule over them, and many women, some pregnant and others delivered. The babies were in cradles, according to their custom. When he had made all these of stone, he set them aside in a certain place, and then made another province of people, in the manner described. In this way, he made another people of Peru, and of its provinces there at Tiwanaku, forming them of stones in the way stated. The same at the site of the houses of the Comendador Hernando Pizarro. There was also a marsh across the river which passes through the city, in the place of the Indian market, the trade plaza of the natives themselves. The inhabitants of this town called it Cusco from ancient times. As to what this name Cusco means, all they can say is that it was the name of this town from ancient times. While Alcavica lived in this town, the earth opened up a cave, 7 leagues from this town, which today they call Pacari Catambo, which means house of origin. The opening of this cave would allow a man to crawl in or out. After this cave opened up, 4 men came out with their wives in the following order. The first one, called Ayar Cash, came out with his wife, who was named Mama Guaco. After him another, called Ayar Oche, came out after his wife, named Cura. After this one another came out, called Ayar Aka, with his wife named Ragua Akyo. After these came another, called Ayar Manco, whom they later called Manco Capac, which means King Manco. After him came his wife, whom they called Mama Okyo. From inside the cave they brought out their handsome golden halberds. The men came out dressed in garments of fine wool woven with gold. On their necks they brought out some bags, also of elaborately woven wool. In these bags they carried sinewed slings. The women also came out dressed very richly in cloaks and sashes, well woven with gold and with fine gold fasteners. Large pins about 2 palms long, which they called topos. These women also brought the ware with which they would serve and cook for their husbands. This included pots and small jars and plates and bowls and drinking tumblers, all of fine gold. When they left that place, they went along the mountain range 7 leagues further on, up to a hill called Guanacare, which is 1.5 leagues from Cusco. They descended down the backside of this hill to a small valley located there, where they planted papas, potatoes, food of these Indians. They went up the hill to look out from there and discern where they could find the best place to sit and settle. Reaching the very top to the hill, Ayar Cash, who was the first to come out of the cave, took out his sling, put a stone in it, and hurled it to a high hill, and struck it with such a blow that it knocked down the hill and made a ravine in it. Moreover, he hurled 3 more stones, and with each one he made a ravine in the high hills. These stones carried from the place where they were hurled to where they hit, as they imagine, a distance of 1.5 leagues. The 3 other companions stopped to think about the strength of Ayar Cash. They moved a short distance away from there, and they decided to seek a way to send Ayar Cash away from their group, because it seemed to them that he was a man of such great strength and valor, that in time he would be giving them orders and subjugating them. They agreed to return from there to the cave where they came from. since they had left so much wealth in golden garments and other utensils inside the cave. They cunningly insisted on their need for these things inside the cave. They told Ar-Kash to go back to get it, and he said this pleased him. Reaching the mouth of the cave, Ar-Kash crawled in, just as he had come out, for there was no other way to enter. Here's another version of the Incan creation story. To understand the origins of their idolatries, because it is true that these Incas did not use writing. They had in a house of the sun called Pocan Concha, which is next to Cusco, the life of each of the Incas, the land that each of them conquered, and their origin myths, painted with figures on boards. Among those images they had the following fables. It was during the life of Manco Capac, who was the first Inca, that they began to claim and call themselves children of the sun. And when the sun worship and idolatry started during this time, they heard important news about the flood. They say that all the different people and everything that had been created perished during it. So it happened that the waters rose over the highest hills that existed in the world, and hence nothing survived except a man and a woman, who remained in a drum box. They say that when the water subsided, the wind blew them to Tiwanaku, which may be more than 70 leagues, more or less, from Cusco, and that the Creator of all things ordered them to stay there as colonists. There in Tiwanaku, the Creator began to make the people and nations that are in this land. He made each nation out of clay and painted on them costumes and clothes that each was to have. And those who were to have long hair he made with long hair, and those who were to have short hair he made with short. When he finished, he gave each nation the language they were to speak, the songs they were to sing, and the seeds and foods they were to sow. There are other nations that say during the flood most of the people died because of the water, except those who could escape to some hills, caves, and trees, and these were very few. From these survivors they began to multiply. Because they escaped to and came from those places, they placed stone idols at them in memory of the first ancestors who emerged there. They gave each waka the name of the person who they had believed had emerged from that place. Thus they worshipped them and offered sacrifices of things that each nation used. Nevertheless, there were some nations that knew before the Incas conquered them that there was a Creator of all things. Although they made some sacrifices to him, they were neither in such amounts nor with such veneration as those made to their wakas. Continuing the above fable, they say that during those times, the Creator was in Tiwanaku. They say that because it was his principal seat, there were some magnificent buildings worthy of great admiration there, in which were painted many of the costumes of these Indians, and there were many stone statues of men. And there all the names and properties that the birds, animals, and creatures have. These Indians also held as very true and certain that neither the Creator nor his sons were born of women, and that they were immutable, and that they were also eternal. Some nations of this land also tell many other absurdities and fables concerning their origins, such that if we were to relate them all, besides being lengthy, they would never end. I will therefore provide only a few, so that you can understand the foolishness and blindness in which they lived. That's all for part 1. Part 2 will be released in a few days. As always, I appreciate you guys for watching and my patrons on Patreon for their support. If you want to join in supporting the channel, it's only $3 a month on Patreon. And you get access to all these videos ad-free, as well as access to all the articles, texts, and videos I watch to research for these videos. It really helps me make these, so I really appreciate your support. You can also message me directly on there and ask any questions or suggest any subjects for videos.